going to be going through all of the campus protests slash riots that are going on, all of the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, pro-Gaza situation. Biden wants to bring hundreds of thousands of people over from Gaza and then have the American taxpayer pay for them. To go through all of this, I have Colonel Tony Shaffer. Colonel Shaffer, thank you so much for joining me again.
Stephen, it's always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk about these riots or protests happening on university campuses. I don't like how Israel is handling this war against Hamas, but they do have the right to defend themselves, and war is ugly. You've been to war, you know that. However, right. I feel like I'm watching young Americans suddenly flash their contempt for their own country, contempt for the Democrat Party that they plan to vote for, suddenly doing Islamic prayers to Allah, suddenly becoming hateful, full of rage against Jewish people. What is your take on all of this? And is this secretly funded by some outside group? Because nationwide, there's a lot of people that aren't even part of these college campuses that the police are arresting.
Yeah, let's start with the funding first. The funding is actually coming from some domestic organizations that you would think wouldn't be supporting it. One of them apparently is the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation is no longer conservative. They've been providing essentially contributions to some of these groups for purposes of what you see. Soros, Open Societies Foundation, no doubt. Some that's coming from them. Other organizations do essentially fundraising, shadow fundraising, that Jewish Voices for Peace, they're not Jewish and they're not Voices for Peace, things like that, do fundraising in the name of the Jews. It's deceptive. So buyer beware. What's that caveat emptor? What's that Roman word? I can never do Latin, but I think you get the picture. You've got to really check into who is doing what and why. So that's the first thing. A lot of money is behind it, a lot of organizations behind it, and it's well organized. Now, what I find ironic, just as a quick aside here, Stephen, you have Christopher Wray, director of the FBI, saying, "Oh, we don't look at protests." Oh, yeah, you do. It's a lie. That's a complete lie. And he's saying that because he's been told by Biden and the White House national security team to not bring attention to this, because the Biden administration is trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying right now to not badmouth or say anything that will diminish the extreme left wing supporting Joe Biden for president. And then by trying to suppress any views of this, they do not acknowledge the damage it's doing to our society, because they can't. The moment you say, hey, yelling Allah Akbar and running around taking over Hamilton Hall, that's bad, you lose them. And right now, it's kind of the White House thinks, oh, well, we're still not bad mouthing them. The president's monitoring. Did you see that yesterday, Stephen? Jean-Luc Picard. Oh, he's monitoring. He's the most intensely monitoring president in the history of the presidency. So he's really got his monitoring eyes on. Okay, so that's what's going on. We've kind of started with the money. We've gone to the why and how and some of that, and why the security forces and FBI won't look at it. Now let's go to the individual level. Some of these people have no idea what they're protesting, literally. I mean, the very groups who are most adamant and aggressive about supporting Hamas would be murdered by Hamas if they were in the Gaza Strip. Gays, lesbians, those who have extreme views that do not comport with Sharia, they'd be dead. I mean, this has been said, and I'm not coming up with this analogy. This is like chickens being pro KFC. It's like, how do you not see that the very thing you're yelling your support for and saying, this is important to us, putting up their flag, removing the American flag, they kill you. You'd be the first that they'd line up and shoot. Did they not see the Nova Festival, Stephen, attacked on the 7th of October? Kids like them were assassinated, were murdered, were raped, were taken hostage and murdered later. How do they not see this? I mean, it's mind-boggling the level of disconnect between the people on campuses supporting Hamas and what Hamas is and what it stands for. And oh, by the way, then because uh, we support Hamas, we have to be anti-Israeli. And I don't understand anti-Semitism. I just don't. I've never gotten it since I was a kid. I went to high school in Lisbon, Portugal, at the American International School there. Ruth Broder was one of my classmates from high school. I still remember her. Ruth was an Israeli. Her dad was the ambassador from Israel to Portugal, and we got along fine. And I never, and we didn't have anti-Semitism, by the way. This is back in the 70s in Lisbon. This was right after the Salazar regime left. Salazar was a fascist, I'll grant you, but people liked him there. Like I say, all fascists aren't necessarily completely bad, according to the folks there in Portugal. But my point being, Stephen, is that within the context of growing up, of trying to understand why certain groups see things the way they do, I've never understood the anti-Jewish sentiment, and yet somehow we have it in droves here in the United States. Now that's the part I don't fully understand because I don't get it. I'm not anti-Semitic. I've never understood anti-Semitism. I worked for the London Center. Herb London was a Jew. Um, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't get it. And so, but now at this point, it's very clear. To your point, you said, people, their true colors are coming out. Man, oh man, I had no idea that we had this level of anti-Semitism embedded within our education system. And one last point before I finish my answer, that has to come from somewhere. That's taught. People don't hate naturally. I just don't believe that. I mean, yeah, I guess you have some bullies or bullies, and they want to have some reason to bully, but this is deeper than that. This is systemic. You have a higher education across the nation. This is before whatever funding showed up. Whatever funding showed up to do this, the seeds of anti-Semitism were already planted. They were already there. They simply poured the water on it to make them blossom. So that's where we're at. Somehow, this is shown in higher education. You have deeply rooted anti-Semitism that has been taught and embedded in the students that they're teaching. So I think it's dangerous. I think it's something that we have to pay attention to. God bless those frat boys in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, here in North Carolina. Just like, boy, I love that picture of them defending the American flag. It's like, yeah, we're not moving.
Holding it up.
Yeah, and then there's things are being thrown at him, and one guy's just videoing. It's like, and there's some girls yelling. It's like, you need to lose weight. I mean, it was just like so kind of that should be our response. Like, you people are ridiculous. We're just not going to let you do it. And I think that's the right answer. It's like, just like, you people are clowns. So
yeah. Well, this morning, Joe Biden finally condemned the protests, but said he's not going to send the National Guard in because people have the right to protest, but they don't have the right to vandalize and cause bodily harm. Do you think that if they don't suppress this and get it under control to where it is actual freedom of speech versus taking over buildings, holding people hostages, running down Jews, blocking them from getting into their classes, are we heading towards another summer of love like before the 2020 election, where there were over 600 protests that turned violent and ended up with burning buildings? What are your thoughts on that?
again, I stick with my position that Joe Biden has not addressed this. Yeah, I see the comment. Order must prevail. What does that even mean? That's like we must be a kindler, gentler people. What does that mean? This is again, Stephen, trying to walk the line, trying to be in the middle, to not try to not win. They don't want to win, they don't want to lose, they want to play it down the middle. So that soft language used by the president, not condemning anything outright, is simply going to promote and continue this. This is what happened at Columbia. The reason Columbia got so far out of hand is because every time they said don't do something, the students did it and got away with it. This is the same thing. This is no different. There's been nationwide nationwide unrest, I guess, is to use a loosely cohesive term to capture the activities of the left in this case. And Joe Biden saying, "Oh, we need to acknowledge order." It's like, yeah, we need to acknowledge that the sun comes up and goes down every day too, but that doesn't mean it's going to change anything. And that's what this is. This is all about soft language meant to not offend those who are anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish, and at the same time appease the Jews, saying, "Oh, he's called for order. He's not really supporting them." Well, the truth is, he is supporting them, and his absence of leadership in this case will be continue to be noticed. And the federal government staying on the sideline, which is what he's basically going to say, is like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, go take care of it," indicates to me that you're going to see something worse. I've said on the record, I'm going to say it here on your show, the upcoming Democratic convention is going to make the 1968 Democratic convention and the protests in Chicago look like a Girl Scout cookie bake sale.
Why do you say that? I just so that I understand what you mean by that.
So go back. Your audience should go back and look at 1968 and the discontent caused by the Vietnam War. That was actually something that I think people understood. It's like, yeah, maybe the war wasn't our best idea, the best moment. We could go down a whole rabbit hole in Vietnam, which I don't think we want to at this point, Stephen. But that was the crux of the issue. In this case, in 2024, the unrest in the left, in the progressive wing of the Democrat Party, is far more caustic. It's not about a single issue. It's about the fact that part of their party hates America. Vietnam wasn't so much about hating America; it was hating what America was doing. Now they hate America. Now they're out to remove the American flag. They're out to destroy the American flag and destroy what we stand for as a people. That's why I thought the protest yesterday, while it was done by frat boys, or the day before yesterday at Chapel Hill, was so important. It's like, yeah, we like America. We appreciate America. And I think that was the most stark look we've seen at, these frat boys aren't super patriotic. You're not going to see them showing up with Trump hats, but it's like, we've had enough. And I think most American people have had enough. But the left has not accepted the fact that they're a minority. I think that's why they're going to act out with great viciousness, great anger, and I think they're not going to allow Joe Biden to have an easy return to the campaign trail or an easy road back to the White House, because simply put, they don't feel he's doing enough. And I guess if you're them, he's not doing enough. He's not actually going against you, but he's not supporting you. And I think the fact that Biden is not saying favorable things or supporting them will be sufficient for them to show up with a great deal of anger and display violence at the convention.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, they think they can get away with it too, because they're getting away with it now. Just saying.
Yeah, that they can, which is why they think they can, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know if you saw this, but I know you'll be able to speak to this. This was a breaking news story. Mark Elias, Hillary Clinton's attorney,
Elias,
that was behind changing hundreds of election laws during the COVID lockdown. He was behind funding and disseminating the Russia collusion hoax to get Donald Trump. He was able to make a lot of changes in Pennsylvania that made voting Democrat or getting Democrat ballots extremely easy, right? Remember Pennsylvania in the middle of the night, suddenly Biden gets hundreds of thousands of unexplained ballots, right? Well, the Third Circuit Court ruled that Pennsylvania should not have accepted tens of thousands of undated and wrongly dated ballots, yet they allowed them to count them, giving Joe Biden the win on ballots, right? And it's taken 3 years to iron that out in just one area. Was proving election tampering held up in court on purpose so that it would be discovered far too late? That's the first question. The second question is, these hundreds of thousands of ballots that showed up in the middle of the night, you were a part of a major investigation of a U.S. Postal semi-truck full of pre-filled out ballots that all of a sudden Bill Barr said, ignore it, do not investigate this. Can you give us some background on that story? Because I think most of the American people have no idea that this story happened and that Bill Barr was shutting it down.
So yeah, look, Mark Elias was very effective in applying Democrat strategy to tactical application to make it work. No doubt, it's brilliant. It's like you got to give them credit where credit is due. They were brilliantly evil. So on those nights, Stephen, where you talk about the voting stopping and Republicans being kicked out, it's been well documented it happened. No doubt that vote stop happened. Somehow there was a miracle, and during that vote stoppage, the Biden numbers went way up and Trump's went way down. Well, how is that possible? Well, I would argue it was possible because the Democrats had the foresight and strategic vision to prepare ballots. That is to say, they had prepared well in advance of the election, curated, ready to count ballots, thousands. My count was at least 700,000. And my count is based on my investigation of the palette of ballots guy named Jesse Morgan. This is all public. You guys can find my, I think America's News covered the press conference, my press conference where I talk about Jesse Morgan and what I found in my investigation. I think it was held the first week of December of 2020. You can all see it's out there. Matter of fact, Stephen, you could put it on your website if you want and have people come find it. And my investigation of Mr. Morgan was thorough, was detailed to the point of where we actually brought in former postmaster generals as a red team to instruct our thinking of was this even possible. We did a background check on him, and yeah, he had some drug problems. He overcame them. He passed his background check to become a contract truck driver with the U.S. Postal Service, and our investigation, based on the way he was able to present information to provide us additional leads and clues that we were following up on investigatively, all indicated to me to this day that Jesse Morgan told the truth. And about 30 days before the 2020 election, we're talking about probably, I don't know, early October, probably the first week of October, somewhere in there. Jesse Morgan was instructed to move a 53-foot trailer, his trailer, from Bethpage, New York to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So why is this important? Well, it's important because Jesse Morgan was a contract carrier. That is to say, the Postal Service employed a lot of people to move bulk mail. Bulk mail is moved quietly. You don't even notice it because it's like in any other trailer. It's not U.S. Postal Service. It just is a big old silver trailer. And his job, 4 times a week, in the middle of the night, because there's no traffic between New York and Pennsylvania, he would take a 53-foot trailer and move it from Bethpage, New York, to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they would move mail. Mail, as you know, is a controlled item. All mail is controlled until it gets to you. So these things are all well documented. Every time he did anything in the system, Stephen, he had to get a punch. He got a little piece of paper. It recorded it electronically into the central U.S. Postal Service system, and he got a tag saying, "I was here." So while he didn't keep or have the chits from that night, he was able to document every stop. And our theory was, well, we'll just go to the Postal Service and confirm or refute it. By the way, they've never confirmed or refuted it. That's a clue. So during the investigation, 3 things came up. First off, Jesse Morgan was credible. He was able to prove to us in a great deal of detail who he was, what he was doing, and the events of that night that he moved the mail. Secondly, the events of that night indicated that something was really off because he was told ultimately to go to a place in Lancaster and drop the trailer. Stephen, you never drop a trailer. You never just drop it and walk away. And that's what he was told to do. You never do that. That's a controlled item. You literally would get fired, but he was told by a postal senior leader, someone who was an executive, dump your trailer. That's another clue. Now, real quick before I go to my third point, our theory of the crime is when he dumped that trailer was picked up by someone else who was in the know and moved into Philadelphia. What happened in Philadelphia? the overnight counting of ballots, and that's what I'm saying. I'm linking his event to that counting on election night. They had to have artifacts, Stephen, to dump into the system. They had to have something physical to go with the numbers. That's what we believe the mail was used for regarding Jesse Morgan's trailer of curated ballots. So that's why. This is the why. Now, my third point of credibility is after examining everything he did, looking at the indicators that something happened. Obviously, we knew already because this was now December of 2020 that hey, they counted the ballots that he brought. Well, that was our theory. And then so third, to what we're about to get to, which I think is the most notable in some ways, I asked my friend, mentor, and coach, a guy named Ed Meese, former Attorney General under President Reagan. I said, Ed, I think, and I went to him, first week of December. I think we have a very credible individual who witnessed mass voting fraud, mass ballot fraud. And Ed, being a dear friend, said, write it up and I'll get it into Bill Barr. Good to go. So I do. I put it all together. I still have the artifacts of what I put together for Bill. By the way, the lack of curiosity in the media over this is mind-boggling. It's like, why don't you all go ask Bill Barr about what I'm saying? No, everybody seems to be like mortified to talk to Bill. I don't get it. It's like, if you dispute me, it's like they won't dispute me, but they won't confirm it. It's like nobody wants to touch this, Stephen. It's the oddest thing. And I've talked to mainstream members of the media about this, and they don't doubt me. It's just they don't want to deal with it. Anyway, back to the story. So at this point, I do the summary. Ed Meese contacts Bill Barr. Attorney generals continue to stay in contact. It's a tradition, like CI directors all stay in contact. It is something they do. Anyway, so after I get in, after the information gets into Bill Barr, Ed Meese talks to Bill Barr and he vouches for me. And I think Bill knew who I was because I was the campaign advisor for Trump 2020, and I did a lot of stuff around the administration to include, advising Mike Pompeo and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I was known to the administration as an advisor. So Ed gets the information into Bill Barr. And after Ed Meese talks to Bill Barr, Ed calls me and says, Tony, I just spoke to Bill Barr. Here's the contact on his staff, a guy named McDonough. Will be contacting you shortly to arrange the meeting with you and Bill Barr. Good luck. Okay, good. So I write down the information, and Ed said, wait a while, wait 15, 20 minutes. So so Bill could talk to this McDonough guy, So before that could happen, oh, by the way, I actually called a member of the mainstream media and told this person what was going on, and they wouldn't cover it. They would not cover it. I'm just saying, it was like, no, we're not covering this.
Wow.
Yeah. So let me go on. You know this person too, by the way. This is not a small name. Anyway, rolling forward. Yeah, I was trying to be as transparent as humanly possible as I was doing this because I didn't want to compromise the investigation, but I wanted artifacts to be placed so people knew what happened in case the catastrophic events happened, which it happened. The catastrophic events happened. Anyway, so not even 10 minutes go by, and I get a call from a 202 number. And that number's documented. I made a memorandum of the call. I answer it, which I don't normally do, but I figure 202 maybe having something to do with Ed's call to Bill. Sure enough, I answer the phone.
And 202 is the Washington, D.C. phone number, right?
Right.
Area code. Okay.
So I get a 202 number, and I answer the phone. It's like, hey, Tony, Bill Barr here. What's going on? So Bill himself is on the phone now. And I'm a bit shocked. I mean, I've seen a lot of interesting things, been yelled at by some interesting people at the cabinet level a few times. So I'm not completely shocked, but it's like, okay, this is going to be interesting. I say, hey, Bill, well, I think Ed just briefed you. Well, you tell me what's going on. Okay. So I go through and I explain everything you and I have been talking about, all the stuff that we've been talking about, I lay out to Ed in detail. Tony, you're interfering with my investigation. What? You will cease and desist now. You are to turn over Mr. Morgan to the Washington field office by 2 o'clock today. This is like 11 o'clock in the morning. It's like, yeah, it's not going to happen. What do you mean it's not going to happen? I don't trust the FBI. They don't have the best record, if you recall, Mr. Attorney General, based on what's happened in the recent past regarding Russia collusion. You don't understand. You don't have a choice in this. Like, yeah, apparently I do. I will not do this. We have to get Mr. Morgan two things: representation by a lawyer and whistleblower status. No, he doesn't need any of that. You don't have time for this. You need to turn him over immediately without regard to anything. I am telling you, you need to turn him over. It's like, I am telling you, I will not comply. I will not comply with this. He is a whistleblower. He needs to be protected. No. And we went back and forth for a good 15 minutes on this, yelling at each other. And it's like, no, I will not comply. I know what happens when you guys get a hold of people. I said, Bill, I have a proposal for you. I have a hybrid team. And by the way, I'm a member of law enforcement in Virginia. Sheriff Dave Decatur knew what I was doing. So I could invoke kind of his department to help us out. I said, I'd like to do a hybrid investigation where we maintain civilian input as well as U.S. Marshals. And I had contacted the U.S. Marshals. I knew who I could go to. So the U.S. Marshals said, we'll come in and help. A Department of Justice organization. Imagine that. U.S. Marshals said, we'll come in and help. We'll be the official law enforcement element of this, because they too did not trust the FBI. Big surprise there, huh? And so this task force I proposed, I said, this is what we're going to brief you on. We want to do a hybrid task force. So there's both transparency, accountability, and legitimate law enforcement investigation. But I will not comply. I will not turn him over to the FBI. And so after yelling at each other for a good 20 minutes, Barr said, well, you will turn him over today at 2. And I said, no, I will not. And that's where the call ended. And so about 10 minutes go by, and I knew something bad was about to happen. Stephen, after being an operative for 30 years, you just kind of know when things are not going to go well. And this was like one of those situations. Anyway, so next, my boss on the operation, Bernie Carrick, calls. Bernie Carrick, who worked for Rudy Giuliani. I was working as a derivative investigator for Rudy. Rudy says, get your stuff and get out of there. You're fired. So, yeah, so Bill had gone through the official chain of command to get me removed. Now, to defend Rudy and to defend Bernie, they didn't understand the context. Bernie was off doing his own thing to support Rudy. They had their own snake-infested forest to deal with, so he wasn't fully. Although everything I'm talking about was well documented, Bernie had not had time to digest it. So this all happened very rapidly. So without regard to the reality which I was facing, I was fired. I was told to get out of there, and I was removed. And so within that time of 15 minutes, Phil Klein of the Armistead Project collects up Mr. Morgan, and without regard to Mr. Morgan's rights, Mr. Morgan's need to become a whistleblower, Phil Klein, without any regard to respecting Jesse Morgan's rights, turned him over to the FBI at 2 o'clock in Washington field office in D.C. And that was the end of my involvement. I still am in touch with Mr. Morgan, and Mr. Morgan did his best to continue to defend himself. But after the FBI got hold of this, everything was stopped and buried. There was no investigation of the leads which we had acquired. There were notable people lined up to do those investigations, which I don't want to name because they get in trouble. But you see some of these folks every day. These are not unknown people. We had leads we wanted to go and look at in Bethpage and New York. I had other members of the federal government who were willing to jump in and help us, legitimate sworn officers of the federal government. And it was all stopped when Bill Barr was able to get hold of Jesse Morgan. Everything stopped.
Wow. To me, that's so crazy. Here's this
I think it's
guy.
pretty crazy, and I was there.
Yeah, and I remember watching this on TV. I didn't know who
Yeah.
you were. We weren't friends yet.
No.
And you're like laying this out. I see the guy. He's like, I've seen the ballots, the artifacts with my own eyes. There were dozens of pallets. I drive them in the middle of the night. They tell me to drop them off. All of a sudden, that cargo shipping trailer disappears
Right.
as if it
Never
never
found.
existed. Hundreds of thousands of ballots end up flooding into Wisconsin and Michigan and mostly in Pennsylvania in the middle of the night. And suddenly
Right.
Joe Biden is awarded the winner of the most ballots. And Bill Barr tells everybody, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. And then tells the media, we've investigated all of the fraud charges and there's nothing. And the people are like, they're totally gaslit.
Yep.
And they're getting amped up. No wonder by the time they get to January 6th, they're like, someone has to listen to us.
Yep. That's a great summation, Stephen. Yeah, that's pretty much what happened. And again, I had a front row seat and a greatly frustrated front row seat. And to this day, to your point, it's like, just go ask Bill Barr what happened. Is Shaffer telling the truth or not? It's pretty simple.
Well, and now he's badmouthed Trump for 3 years, and then just in the last week, he's like, "Oh, I'll be voting for him." Like, what? You badmouth this guy. You refuse to do investigations. You refuse to pardon certain people. You refuse to investigate certain people, and then now you're on public TV. You say, "Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna vote for Donald Trump." Like, what? Dude, like I can't trust this man.
Well, I found that out the hard way. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, you did. Wow. Okay. Final question. I appreciate you coming on.
Sure.
Is James O'Keefe used to be the head of Project Veritas. He's famous for getting people at the White House on dates, and then they divulge information, or people at Pfizer, or all kinds of border patrol people. He gets them talking and they start revealing all of their secrets. Well, just in the last few days, he did a sting operation against several high up CIA contractors that openly admitted on camera that they withheld important intel from Donald Trump because they didn't want him to have it, number one. And number two, if he talked about it out loud, it wouldn't continue to push the story in the direction that the CIA wanted. You think there's any truth to these people that he's caught on camera?
I have no doubt. So yeah, full disclosure, I had a conversation with Mike Flynn about this very thing when I was on the transition team in December of 2016. So I'd been called to sit down with. I was on the transition team. I was working with Mike as his liaison to several senior leaders who were already in the Obama administration. I don't want to go into the detail. We could talk about that some. Not that I want to hide anything. It's just it would take some explanation. Anyway, so as I'm meeting with Mike, we're going through what I feel we should do regarding the National Security Council. Now, there was talks about what position I wanted. I didn't really want a position, to be honest with you, but I'm there to be helpful. And so during this conversation at Trump Tower, and I think it was like 17th or 18th of December, I don't remember the exact date. I said, Mike, one of the things we have to do, based on what we can do, the U.S. government, we have to sit down with Trump and give him a full briefing on all the authorities and all the access he should have to all these black programs. Let me tell you, there's a ton of black, not minority, like as in racial, but I'm just black operations, those things which are, we call them, the official term is special access programs, SAPs, but the euphemism is black programs. And so having been a warrior in those programs, it's like I knew they were going to hide stuff from Trump. It's like there's no doubt in my mind. And Mike did too. Mike Flynn knew that they were going to try to keep Trump out of a bunch of stuff, because to know some of this stuff, it's like there's no going back. Once you have knowledge of something, of some of the things we can do, so it's like, no, we as loyal Americans have to sit down with the president and tell him everything. Tell him what authorities he has, because we knew also, Stephen, they were going to buffalo Trump and say, "Oh, you can't look at that. He's a freaking president. He can look at anything he wants." And we knew this was coming. We knew from just the people we had spoken to. And so, while I don't know specifics about who James O'Keefe spoke to, I know that we saw it coming, and that Mike and I were going to try to get there ahead. And I said, "Look, why don't you and I just sit down with the president one on one? Well, three of us together, and just said, look, these are all the programs they're going to tell you don't exist, and this is what you need to know." So that conversation never happened, obviously, because Mike Flynn was fired, and then I was put in the corner. I was held at arm's length to not see the president during his 4 years in office. Well, I advised people around him; they would not let me see him. So just say it.
Do you one more question? Do you think if Trump gets in for a second term, he's now learned that these programs exist, that he needs to be read in on them, and that he's not going to be kept in the dark like he was on the first round?
I think he knows that there were things that he was not permitted to see, which he should have been, as the ultimate. He's the guy. He is the executive branch, and I think that he'll be smarter than the average bear next time. Yeah, I think he's gonna. I don't know this. I've not been asked. I'm not saying this with any sort of detailed. This is my speculation. I think he's going to call people like me in and say, what did they not tell me?" At least if he's smart, that's what he's going to do. So we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Colonel Tony Shaffer, thank you so much for spending today with us, going through
Thank you.
this information. My gosh, it's like drinking from a fire hose every single day. But we'll get through this. And thank you again for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Stephen.